You've heard the stories, mysterious drownings, ghostly apparitions, and a lake with a body count that'll send shivers down your spine. But what if I told you that the tranquil waters of Lake Lanier might be hiding more than just a tragic history? Could this seemingly serene spot be one of the most haunted places in America? We're about to dive into the heart of Lake Lanier, where legends of vengeful spirits and unexplained disappearances blur the line between fact and fiction. Is this just another urban legend? Or is there something truly sinister lurking beneath the surface? Lake Lanier is one of Georgia's most popular tourist destinations, attracting millions each year with its beautiful scenery and recreational activities. But with over 700 deaths reported since its creation, many believe the lake is cursed. Join me as we unravel the chilling history and paranormal phenomena surrounding this infamous lake.
So, back in the 1950s, the US Army Corps of Engineers created Lake Lanier by damming the Chattahoochee River. That sounds really, really straightforward, right? But this is where it starts to get really dark. To make this lake, essentially, entire towns were flooded. Homes, businesses, graveyards, absolutely everything had to be flooded. Now, in all of that flooding and in all of those buildings, those towns, and we're not just talking about one town, by the way, we're talking about many towns, multiple towns. In my research, I discovered there's like 20 cemeteries, 20 graveyards that they didn't have the time to exhume the bodies and relocate them. So they basically just flooded all of these graveyards and cemeteries. And, you know, obviously the government compensated the residents for all of this. But let's be honest, moving entire communities isn't exactly an easy task, is it? Imagine this, a vast lake covering what used to be thriving communities with all the belongings, memories, and yes, graves, cemeteries, still submerged beneath the water. For decades, locals have whispered about the spirits of those that are left behind, restless. And can you blame them, really? I mean, how would you feel if your final resting place was disturbed? Not just disturbed, but your grave has literally just been submerged beneath the murky waters of a man-made lake. It's not going to sit right with you, is it? But these are the origins of Lake Lanier's haunted reputation. But are these stories just local lore, or is there something more to it? Now, if you're like me, you probably love a good ghost story. Well, Lake Lanier has more than its fair share, let me tell you. Now, one of the most infamous of these stories involves the Lady of the Lake, right? Now, we all know that wherever there's a body of water, whether it's a lake, whether it's a river, whether it's a pond, there's always a story about a Lady of the Lake when you're nearby. However, this Lady of the Lake story actually has a bit of substance to it, because prior to what I'm about to tell you, there were no sightings of a lady in the lake. Like, this is 1958, and two young women, Delia Parker Young and her friend Susie Roberts, they're driving across a bridge at Lake Lanier, and the car suddenly swerves off the road and plunges into the lake. Now, 18 months later, Delia's decomposed body is found, and it's missing two toes, just two toes, and both the hands. Bit weird, right? That's all that was missing from the decomposed body. Susie, on the other hand, well, Susie wouldn't be found for decades. Now, here's where things get really, really eerie and really start to pick up, because ever since that accident, locals have then started reporting seeing a ghostly figure dressed in a blue dress, just like Delia, and wandering the bridge and the lakeshore, randomly appearing. And some say she's searching for a lost friend. Others believe she's still just trying to escape the watery grave that claimed her life. Either way, when you start to delve into this particular story, it's actually really hard to shake, because all of these sightings, all of this started to happen just after this accident. And it doesn't stop there either. Fishermen and boaters on the lake, at night especially, they've reported seeing mysterious unlit boats, so basically boats that are on the water without any lights, and they're just drifting on the water, and there's nobody on them. They're just out there randomly floating around on the lake. Now, when they start to get closer and investigate these boats, start to get closer to them, the boats literally just disappear, like literally vanish into thin air, almost like a mist, without any trace. They're just gone. So some people are speculating that these spirits are those that could have drowned, they're trapped in the lake forever, they're reliving their final moments, etc., etc. It does sound something like out of a horror movie, doesn't it? But these reports, they're alarmingly frequent. They happen all the time. And they're not just folklore either, these ghost stories. They're not just from the local community. They've been shared by people from all walks of life, all backgrounds, all different parts of the US coming to Lake Lanier, etc., etc. Government officials, police departments, they're seen by a whole variety of different credible witnesses as well, which is what you want. And they all swear by what they've seen. Now, as we all know, when there is a little bit of smoke, there's more often than not fire to go with it. So, is it possible that Lake Lanier is more than just a pretty place to go boating and fishing and swimming? I think we're just scratching the surface. Now, I'm not one to jump to conclusions, but when you start hearing about the sheer number of people who have gone missing or died under mysterious circumstances, I'll put my teeth back in, certain circumstances at Lake Lanier, you can't help but wonder what's actually going on there. And then just go back to the beginning of the video slightly when I mentioned, recapping on there's been 700 deaths. 700 deaths since the lake was created in the 1950s. That's just over 10 a year, 70 years ago, just over 70 years ago. That's just over 10 deaths a year around that lake. Plus, there's also mysterious disappearances, though persons of all walks of life have just literally disappeared. And they've not even turned up. They've never found these people as well. So there's dozens of those as well. So it's going to be far more than 10 a year. I mean, take the case of Kelly Nash. This is a case from 2015. 25-year-old vanished near his home near Lake Lanier. With him being a local, as you'd expect from anybody really, not just because he's a local, but an extensive search followed that disappearance. But it wasn't until a month later that his body was found just bobbing along, floating in the lake. And do you know what the official cause of the death was? It was accidental drowning. But get this, there were no clear indications of how he actually ended up in the water. There was no sign of struggle. There was nothing. And by all accounts, he didn't go down there to swim. He didn't go down there, to get on a boat and do some fishing. He literally just disappeared, randomly disappeared. The family, his family, to this day, all insist that something's not quite right. Something doesn't add up. Something's happened that's out of the ordinary. Was it just a tragic accident, or do you think there's a darker force at work here? Put your comments below. I'd love to hear what you think about that one. But there's also a strange story about three fishermen who, God, they only disappeared in 2019, so it was only about 5 years ago. Their boat was found adrift, like, again, just bobbing along on the water. It was found adrift. It was perfectly intact, by the way. But there's no signs of the men. Like, they just disappeared. There was nothing, literally nothing in the boat, just their boat randomly found one day bobbing along. An extensive search also took place 5 years ago. Their bodies were never recovered. They've still not been recovered. So they just randomly disappeared. And thinking about that one, when I was doing this research and I was thinking about stories to kind of like relay to you, what really jumped out to me at that one is if one of those men had jumped overboard, right, let's just say they fell overboard, like the chances of all three of them falling overboard and not returning home and just disappearing are pretty slim, right? I'm just not sure what's gone on there. So that is a really, really weird one. Now, because the bodies were never recovered, there's a lot of stories out there that, have they, you know, have they all fallen into the lake? How did they just vanish into thin air? And when you go into the research, when you start to think about this, each new case that you come across, that legend of Lake Lanier grows and grows and grows. It's almost like snowballs. And to be honest, I don't think we've heard the last of this lake. I think this is just going to keep rumbling on and rumbling on. And, could these tragic events be connected to the lake's haunted past, or are they simply just unfortunate consequences of a dangerous body of water? Unfortunate consequences amounting to 700 deaths, though, and lots of mysterious people not being found. Don't quite add up to me, but either way, you look at this, the numbers don't lie, do they? And for me, there's something about this lake that just doesn't sit right. There's something a little bit strange going on here. So, are we really dealing with ghosts? That's the question. Or is there more a rational explanation for the eerie events that happen at Lake Lanier all the time? And I think kind of take a step back and think about this for a second. We need to put our skeptical hats on, look at the facts. So Lake Lanier isn't just a typical lake, it's man-made, as we mentioned before, which means that because this lake's been man-made and it's flooded towns, it has an uneven and unpredictable bottom filled with debris from the towns it's submerged. So you'll have churches, you'll have houses, you might have, quite tall buildings in there. But the information that I've read about, I believe the depth of that lake at its deepest point is like 300 foot deep, 300, which is not like a house or a church 50 to 100 feet tall, right? It's 300 feet deep. So it probably does make it a hazardous place for swimmers and boaters and anyone who happens to end up in the water. The chances of them being snagged on something, I think, could be relatively slim, but let's keep our skeptical hat on and say that this is accountable for quite a number of them. The water's obviously going to be cold. Lakes like this are going to be murky underneath as well, so visibility isn't going to be great. So they can be disorientating, especially if the weather suddenly turns in. And I reckon that would lead most experienced swimmers into a bit of trouble, I guess. If you're not expecting it, you're not prepared for it. Psychologists as well will probably tell you that so-called paranormal encounters in this instance are probably nothing more than power of suggestion. So if you believe a place is haunted and you go there, your mind will start to play tricks on you. So, the wind rustling through some tree leaves, you might mistake that as hearing voices. The sunlight coming through trees and branches, you might, mistake those shadows for being similar to the shape of a person, etc. But here's the thing: how can you discount so many people reporting the same eerie experiences time and time again? And they're all in different places. They're all slightly different. It is hard just to write them all off, isn't it? As just kind of coincidence and imagination and the power of suggestion. So where does that leave us then? I mean, even if you are a skeptic in all this, and that's absolutely fine, you can't deny that Lake Lanier has a dark, mysterious kind of feeling. Even just watching this video and listening to me relaying these stories back to you, it probably doesn't seem right, does it? If you're gonna be level-headed about it, something's not quite right. Something's happening. So whether it is just the lake's dangerous conditions, or is it something more supernatural, I do not know. But it's clear that for whatever reason, it's no ordinary body of water, is it? So, after everything we've uncovered, what's the verdict? Is Lake Lanier truly haunted, or are we just simply looking for explanations to make sense of a place that historically has seen a lot of tragedy since it was filled in essentially with water? One thing's for sure: Lake Lanier has a story that's far from over. And I did mention before, I think this is going to rumble on. I think we're going to hear more and more about this. And one of the reasons why I thought, yeah, I'm going to do a video about this is because it was only in May of this year, so 2024, 3 or 4 months ago, that there was another death in the lake and a body was recovered in the lake. So this story is not over at all. This isn't something in the past that's gone on and we're trying to figure it out. This is real. It's like it's happening, currently happening. Whether you believe in the paranormal or you're a hard-nosed skeptic, it is hard to ignore what seems to be hanging over this lake. And you know what? Maybe it's restless spirits of those displaced by its creation, or maybe it's just the weight of its tragic history. But there's something about this place. It keeps drawing people in, and not always for the best reasons, unfortunately. So if you do find yourself in Lake Lanier, by the way, just take a minute to remember the stories that we've uncovered today, what I've relayed back, whether you are there for the boating, the fishing. I believe it's absolutely beautiful. And on my screen here, you've probably seen a few images of Lake Lanier that have popped up there throughout the video. It looks amazing. Whether you're there to enjoy the view, keep your eyes and ears open, because you never know what you might encounter or see out there, and just be mindful. But again, is that the power of suggestion from the Autistic Man of Mysteries talking to you today? Listen, I think it's been great to talk about this. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for joining me on this kind of deep dive into the mysteries of Lake Lanier. If you're as fascinated by the unexplained as I am, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. We've got some more explorations into the world's most mysterious places coming up in other videos, and certain events that have happened. We're going to dive into those as well and pull up some facts and talk about that. Bit of therapy for me. If you've had your own strange experience at Lake Lanier, for my viewers over in the US, drop a comment below. Let the community know what you feel about the place. If you've seen something, I'd love to hear your stories if you've actually seen some strange experiences. And everybody else who hasn't had the pleasure of being over at Lake Lanier, then drop your comments below and let me know what you think about all this, because it's perplexing, I'm not going to lie. Thank you so much for watching. It's been an absolute pleasure. Hand on heart, I appreciate every minute, every second of my videos that you watch. Like, subscribe, leave your comments. It's been great to speak to you all. Thanks a lot. Take care, and I'll see you again.